Welcome to Cross Platform Podcast, where we discuss how to solve productivity problems across platforms. I'm Augusto Pinaud,
And I'm Art Gelwicks.
and in this episode 65, we are talking about collaborative task. And this is a dearly topic to me. And I've been doing this for clients. I do this as a certified expert for NOSPI when I go and implement it into locations. My business live in NOSPI. Part of my personal life live in Todoist, and I have said, that those two NOSPI as well as Todoist are incredible applications for collaborative tasks. The difference between one and the other, in my opinion, is that Todoist will allow you to do traditional task
Mhm.
management, while Nusby is really designed strongly from task-based management, and there is a difference into that. So let me start there. When traditional management is you create a project, and under that you create the task. In an application like Todoist, you will be able to say, okay, is create the thumbnail for the episode. Okay, that's a task
Mhm.
that Art does. So if I'm creating that project, when it says create the thumb, okay, I will be able to assign to Art, and it will come on his system. What we do in Nusby is different. What we do in Nusby is we manage everything from files to steps to the collaboration to will you want to include
Mhm.
in that task. We don't really use necessarily a project. Every task is the project that you move forward and go and assign. What that gives is an incredible, powerful thing. When you have a question and say, okay, where is this? Okay, and everybody has come to that question at some time, and normally that question doesn't happen at 2 p.m., happen at 9, okay, where you cannot grab your
Yeah.
phone and call somebody else. When you work this way and you really put the information there, whoever had that thought can go to the system and find the story. Again, the difference between Todoist and Nusby is where that exchange is more incentivated. Nusby is designed to do it that way, do that collaboration task based. While in applications like Todoist, you can collaborate and it's easy to collaborate, but you can also use it as a pure traditional task management
Mhm.
system.
It, in the pre-show, we were talking quite a bit, and just to lay the groundwork for people listening, um, one of the challenges when we talk about cross-platform solutions is often we talk about just our own platforms. How do we handle our own stuff? How do we manage our own tasks? And in running this show, you and I have used a couple of different tools to
Mhm.
try to organize the flow of recording episodes and thumbnails and publishing and things like that. And we've been using Notion for quite a while, but we're also both very big Todoist fans. And coming up with a collaborative task management solution is a whole different, yeah, it's a whole different kettle of fish when it comes to defining what tool you're going to use and how you're
Mhm.
going to use it. Now, the advantage that we have in this conversation is we've settled on a tool that we both know extremely well and we've been using a long time. So we're very comfortable with it. There isn't a change management part of this process that so often can derail these common things. But as we start going through this exercise, of restructuring how we run this show using Todoist, just in our little back and forth conversations, it raises some of those things that people need to be aware of. Things like common terminology. And the term that I'm going to throw out here is one that Todoist uses that you would think would be easy, but it's not. They have the term projects.
Right.
And Todoist has the ability to create a project, which is basically a collection of tasks. Of those, you can have subtasks and things like that. But what they don't provide is a capability to easily go through and roll up multiple projects into one view. If you think about it from like project management software perspectives, that would be program management. Well, that's not
Mhm.
a feature that's here.
Correct.
It's not a showstopper, but it does
No.
require a very close definition of the term. So now when I read projects, before we started this conversation, when I read the word projects, or when I was reading the word projects, to me, it was each line item was a project in that left hand menu.
Mhm.
And I could have sub projects under a main project. So I had the main project and then I had each of the sub projects for my client. And that was my way of keeping things organized. Well, the problem is I could not go in easily and say, show me everything for that client. It just doesn't roll up. So I have to think about it now at at a higher level. And I like the way you phrased it, thinking about the projects being that 15,000 foot level. So structurally, I'm going to be changing my list model so that that top level is a client or my company or something significant like my home, and then under that I will create the task cards, which up until this point, again, terminology wise, I thought would be an individual task. No, those are really going to be the project as part of that project. And
Correct.
that, I think that's where I like to start this when I talk with people, is having a common terminology, having a common glossary that everyone agrees to and is willing to follow is the first step you have to have in having any sort of a cross-platform collaborative solution. I mean, think about all the times that you've had with Noseby talking to people, just the amount of time you spend getting them to understand Noseby speak or Todoist speak.
And you made a very important point. And even when you go outside of this and you think on applications like Microsoft Teams, okay,
Mhm.
Microsoft Teams, it's very powerful. You can create the repositories, you can create the groups, you can create a lot of things. But if you don't go and understand that same terminology, what happens is everything get lost. And I was with a client, and they were having an outside of the normal hours call.
Mhm.
Okay, and they were in the meeting and they were frustrated because he could not find who was the person. Okay, and one of the
Okay.
people on the team answered, but there is a document, okay, in here inside of Teams files that we refresh every 6 months, who have the next 6 months of who is on call. So, and Teams is not the application when you're looking somebody for an emergency at 9 p.m. because that for most people is not on their phones. It will not make enough noise. That's the reason this same sheet has our personal cell phones. When we're on call, this is the call. Okay, and what was the problem? The information was there. It's just this person was not aware that that document exists in that place. Okay, and it was well placed. It was a useful document. Everything
Mhm.
from that perspective was perfect, except that nobody communicate. Okay, we have this feature and we did this in a proper
Yeah.
way. So when the emergency came, this person was like, okay, and I cannot find the people, and he was trying to leave messages in Teams. He couldn't find the cell phone, personal cell phones, or work cell phones from these people. But why? There was an emergency that it was not really an emergency because the
Mhm.
preparation in case of an emergency was done. The communication wasn't. And that was
Yeah.
where that failed. And this is the main issue with this and try to collaborate. The problem is what kind of communication you need, and we are moving our show to do it, okay, for that collaboration. It was interesting, if I go and open, okay, okay, it will say things like, and we're migrating, okay, this is, but
Mhm.
things like, okay, publish on YouTube, great, okay, that is a task and that is assigned, but is that really the task? Okay, or what are the steps, and or will that be enough for, if I give you that task, for you to go, okay, perfect, and get it done, or not? And that's where that communication game is very important. The two
You're right.
applications that I tend to recommend that are Nusby,
Hmm.
where, as a disclaimer, I am one of their certified experts. Okay,
Hmm.
and Todoist is that those both have something that is very powerful, and it's what they call the comments, where I can go right now and I can get a task
Hmm.
for you that says, and I can, instead of email you, instead of anything in that task, I can go and ask you, what do you mean? Okay, because these are the five things. Do you need anything else? And that history of communication stays there. So I can search for that again. I can find that key information later on if needed.
And this is, I'll go back to the terminology thing because that's one of the things that trips me up, or I have to remind myself about with a tool like Todoist. Comments, by definition, are commentary on something. If they had called that notes, immediately I would have had a different perspective as to its functionality. And if you click in the comments box in Todoist, you have the ability to attach files. You have the
Mhm.
ability to record audio or to put emoji in. So there's a lot of functionality that's provided for that particular feature that's really necessary, that I think the naming suppresses its visibility.
Correct.
But that's a minor thing to get around, but it does raise a good question. So we start to talk about, managing episodes, and I'm just going to use our show process as
Yeah,
the
yeah.
example for this. So as we go through, we've got the top level bucket, which is the show, and then under that we have a card for each episode. Now, within that, or within that card, we'll have all the steps. We'll have, putting together the show's agenda. We'll have pulling together news links. I can see definitely doing that because we were doing that over in Notion. We should do that over here.
Mhm.
Um, but this raises a question. So each one of those news links, if we have the card for the show, and then we have a subcard or a subtask for the news episode, the topic episode, and the tips episode, on those cards, do we then have tasks for each of, let's say, each of the news articles we want to cover? Okay. So we have that description. And then in the comment for that one, include the links for that particular one, if there's, direct links to go and look it up during the show.
Correct.
That's, it seems logical to talk through. There's a lot of steps there. So documenting this is really important. Where would you
In complete
document
agreement.
this? Would you document this in, I mean, I could, again, just brainstorming, I could see having in the cross-platform project a card, which is the process.
Mhm.
Because one of the things, and for those of you who are Todoist people, may not be aware of this, you can start any task with an asterisk and a space, and it will get rid of the little check circle.
Right.
So it just becomes a text line. So you could create a section inside your project of
So, and I am
procedures.
going to and I'm going to deviate from where you are to bring a
Okay.
practical example to this.
All right.
Okay, I have two kids. Okay, 13 and 9,
Mm-hmm.
and their responsibilities are managed in Todoist. Why? Because that's the application that my wife used. So that put everybody in the same app. Okay, but when you look at what my kids see,
Mm-hmm.
okay, they have three kind of things. One are the task. Okay, hey, you need to take. It's your responsibility to put the table to set the table today. Okay, and it's the whoever kid set the table, the other kid is the responsibility to take it away. Okay, so that way you have lunch and dinner that way. So it's there is no complaint that, oh, I was we didn't have lunch in here and I take now both responsibilities. That way it
Mm-hmm.
balances. Any other parent who is listening to this will agree that they on those conversations and ideas. Okay, but also they have things that I want to remind them. Okay, for example, um agreements that we make. Okay, my son, the one who has 9, he wants a phone. Okay, and I told
Okay.
him, sorry, there's no phone. Okay, and he's been looking any way that he can think to negotiate for money for his phone. Okay, good for
Okay.
him. So he came recently and said, okay, so I have a deal to offer you, to propose to you. And I said, okay, what is the deal? Well, if I get everything, he's going to fourth grade. If I get everything
Okay.
in first trimester A plus, will you give me
Mhm.
money to my phone? Okay, well, that's fair. My opinion is fair. So I offer him an amount of money for all A pluses per trimester. Okay, but I create the deal that we did in there. I did exactly what you said, a star
Okay.
space, and put the deal. Why?
Okay.
Because I need to consider two things into this. One, I may forget, okay? And two,
Sure.
he may forget. If either of us forget, that's not the problem. The problem will be if either of us will remember something different.
Yeah, having common understanding is key. Having unified understanding is even more important.
Exactly. Because if at the
So,
end of the thing he comes now,
no, I get that.
4 A's and 1B, okay, I happy can tell you, hey, let's go here. And it has happened because he had a lot of
Mhm.
those things, okay, um, that are there. But that, as a parent, okay, create an incredible, super powerful place to go. Okay,
Sure.
because
I can
there
see
is
that.
no discussion of what it was said. I don't understood, didn't understood. That's not what I remember. No, 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 no. When I created, we sit together for a second, say, this is what you understand. Go read it. And after it's that, then sorry, that's what it
Mhm.
says. Okay, we agree into that, and it's done in the same way, okay, because I do stuff, okay, similar to, oh, I do stuff similar to that in Nusby for my company, okay,
Right.
where I I don't like email, okay, why? Because email swallow things, okay. You send me an email, and like, okay, Art,
And
where is that? I send it to you via email, and it's like, hold on, let me check. Oh, sorry, I missed it. Why? Because if you receive over the 100 emails a day, it's very, very easy to lose things. And most people in that volume or above can't clean their email until the end of the week. So there is a bunch of
right.
stuff you receive on Monday that maybe Saturday and Sunday that you are catching up with that if you are lucky. So
Now it's you're right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
when all the communication happened there, okay, there is no doubt. That's advantage one.
Yes.
Advantage two is if I want right now to know, and let's bring back to our episode, even that I do it in other platforms, and I said, hey, where is episode 66? Where is the thumbnail? I don't see it. Okay, maybe Art send it to me and maybe Don. I don't know. I
Mhm.
can now go there, okay, and leave you a message. Hey Art, did you send me the thing? Can you
Yeah.
post it in here? Or not only that, even can you send me? Why you don't post it in here? I can download it.
Mhm.
No email, no nothing is there. So for the practical of work, okay, instead
Yeah.
of hoping that people see the information, instead of hoping that you send this email that include 3 different projects, okay, and you are mad now because you could answer 1 out of 3. Sorry, if you send the 3 things on the appropriate project, the appropriate answer will land. Okay, and sometimes I'm responding 1 out of 3 because it's the one I have information. It's not that I'm ignoring the other 2. But when you do it this in these systems, one, you reduce your email to a point that now you can digest the amount of input. But two, you can really apply priority and at what you are digesting, at what you are looking into the projects. Because when you see, for example, buy food for the dog, okay, there is a moment that that thing is not a priority, and there is a moment that that thing is a priority. Okay, but
Yes, the dog, it's always a priority.
but yeah, well, but when it still has food, it's not yet a need to happen today thing.
Oh, I think
Okay,
mine would say I never feed him enough. So,
well, That may be true. That may be true. But that's what this kind of collaboration do. It takes
Yeah.
you out of. I was talking to a prospect a couple of weeks back, and he was sharing to me how he, as the CEO of the company, he had two manufacturers, okay, in two different cities, an hour away each. Okay, no problem. Okay, except that he was sharing with me that he most of the information he gets through email and WhatsApp. Okay,
Right.
and
And
I'm
that makes
looking at him
sense.
like, okay, and then how do you know? And he admitted to me, well, there are moments that I don't know. So I
Mhm.
need to start thinking, okay, who are the people in this project? Okay, and try to start. Oh well, maybe Art. Let me check Art WhatsApp. Oh no, it's
Yeah.
not in there. Okay, who else? Augusto, it's not in there. Okay, who else will be in this project? And he said it. It's a way. It's a whole. Okay, sometimes it's easy because you remember, find it quick, but most of the time it's a whole.
Now, there's two problems that we get into, though. Well, not two problems, but there's two ways of making this happen. When you decide on a tool like this, if it's professionals like you and I, you come to a consensus agreement as to what tool you're going to use, and then
Mhm,
you work to that common goal. But often in a business or a corporate environment, it's whatever is determined as the tool that they have licensed. You will use this. And a lot of people will push back against that. They'll say, look, you know what? I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to send it by email. And that has to become a critical part of that change management, because unless you have everybody, you know, not to use the phrase, unless everybody's rowing in the same direction, you're just going to
correct.
be going in circles.
Mhm,
So tools like this can be really powerful, but you also have to set procedural guidelines around how they're used. I'll go back to note taking, for example. If you have a task and you're working on a task and you have the comment section, you can put a lot of stuff in that comment section.
mhm,
But what should go in there and what shouldn't? I mean, do you have things? There's the ability to attach files. Should I be attaching files to the tasks, or should they be stored in my cloud based file system?
mhm.
Those are things that there isn't a clear answer because the functionality works in either case, but there has to be a procedural answer because that's what you're going to educate everybody on. You're
Correct.
all going to say, okay, if I have, we'll go back to our show example. As a part of the process of creating an episode, the task for recording the episode should include creating the thumbnail for YouTube and then pushing that thumbnail out to YouTube once the recording's done. Well, that makes sense to include a copy of that thumbnail in that task. Why? Because it's two different people involved to complete the task.
Mhm.
If it was just me creating the thumbnail and then publishing it out, there isn't a huge a lot of benefit for me to attach that thumbnail in that task as well. But because there's the two of us involved in that process, that task can also be a handover point of content and information. So if I need to supply to you, for example, a document reference, putting a link to that document in the task makes perfect sense
Mhm.
because I don't have to email it to you or text it to you. You know where it's going to be. It's a consistent delivery method and it's easy to go back and find later on. But I don't know that I would necessarily use it for a lot of detailed information about a given task because I think it might be a little difficult to get that information back. And that's where you have to balance.
Mhm.
So, like,
And
for example, my stuff, when I take notes in OneNote, I can grab a URL from OneNote and I can put it into Todoist and I can have that link back. It's not perfect. It's not bulletproof. I mean, there are cases where I can have, broken links and things like that, but it's still better than just having things floating around there out there randomly.
well, and but you mentioned something important. What is the procedure? And the procedure doesn't matter if it's the company or it is the personal procedure, And we have talked here on prior episodes when I brought my technology card. The
Mhm.
technology card, it's nothing than a procedure. Okay.
Right.
And it's completely personal. That's my personal procedure of how I use the technology. In this case, it's not different. Where do you want to have them? Because you're right, it doesn't matter if you have it in Nusby or you have it in Todoist or you have it in Dropbox. The question is, what is the standard? The problem comes when you have, okay, for cross platform, I will store them in Dropbox, but then for my other podcast, then I will store them in no OneNote, and then for the
Mhm.
things that I do with my wife, I will use Box, and then for the things I do with my kids, I will use Dropbox. Because the problem is, if you can establish it that precise, no problem. But if you change and say, well, let me put this one in Dropbox because it's big.
Mhm.
Oh, let me put this one in OneNote because it doesn't matter. Now what happened is you will never know what it is. So the
Right.
power of that get lost. To answer what you were saying early, what I advise when we work with companies is doesn't matter. You want to put it in Nusby? Great. You don't want to put it in Nusby? Great. The problem is they can only be on one place.
Yes. There
And
needs to be a single point of record.
correct. And the reason I tend to push them to NUSPI is when if you decide, no, no, but we have this SharePoint, great. Who is going to be the responsible person
Mhm.
to create every time we create a new project in NUSPI to replicate to SharePoint so we can have the files in there? And as soon as you put that responsible person, okay, my files tend to always go back to Nusby, my experience.
Well,
Why? Because why do you want to add an additional thing? And what we have done in some of the cases where, well, the files now
mhm.
gets, too big, okay, and synchronization start. That's the moment where we create not for every project, but we create exception in that rule. Okay,
Yeah.
for 99.9% of our projects, everything lives in Nusby. For this project who has these massive files, the massive files live into this directory, and you just attach the link and you're ready to run.
No, I agree completely. That's that piece of if you're willing to make a complicated system and maintain it, that's fine, but it's also
Right.
wasted effort. It needs to be simplified. I build things in SharePoint all the time for people, and often those solutions get way overcomplicated
Hmm.
from their initial designs. And then I sit down with them and say, okay, hold on, let's simplify it way down. Let's get it down to the very basics because basics can be maintained. Complexity becomes unwieldy very quickly. And it also, when it changes hands, when you have to involve somebody else into it, or even worse yet, you hand over support of something to someone else, now it's all kinds of chaos and trials and tribulations to make that work the same way. Because as people change, their understanding as to how the solution was defined, how the platform was originally configured, changes. It doesn't match up. So as we go through the steps of migrating this, I think we're going to see some interesting pieces of putting the episodes in place. And I want to see how that mirrors to some of the other things I was doing for some of my other projects. Um, just to go back to the why we moved away from Notion.
Hmm.
Uh, Notion works. Notion's
Oh
fine.
yeah, it
Notion
does.
would do this, uh, but and here's the but, it does require more hands-on maintenance than Todoist does. Um, it's not designed to do this. It can do
I
it, but
think,
it's
and I think that second point,
yeah.
I will put it as the first point, because as you said, there is nothing wrong with Notion. Okay,
Mhm.
and Notion is a very powerful tool, but it's not designed for this. So I can make it work, but it's
Mhm.
not designed for.
Yeah, I think from and we were kicking around in the pre-show some of the nice features about Todoist specifically that we use as individuals. I had mentioned the fact that now Todoist is supported on Wear OS 3, so I can access my to-do lists from my watch, and I can add things to Todoist directly from my watch. And I have found that that is probably one of the features I am using most frequently anymore on my watch, even more so than some of the basic ones. Because instead of having to take a reminder or make a note or even pull out my phone and pull out my stylus, I can just turn to my watch and say add a task, and
Mhm.
go through two taps on the watch, and I've added a task in Todoist, and I know whatever device I go back to then afterwards, I can then go process that task. It's not lost. And as we've said so many times before, ubiquitous capture makes or breaks the system.
Correct.
The second part is, and we kicked this around a little bit too. This is one of my favorite features of Todoist, is the way they've handled their widgets on Android. You can have multiple widgets on an Android launcher, because most launchers support multiple pages, and you can point them at projects, labels,
Mhm.
filters, whatever you want. So I have a page on my phone that points at my Amazon shopping list, because my Amazon shopping list gets passed from my Echo to Todoist through a
Right.
back end connection. But I have it right there. I can just pull it right up and the list is there, and I know I can get to it on everything else. So when we're working on something, if we're, putting together an episode, I know now that I don't have to worry too much about where it's going to go and how you're going to get to the information, because this is where you live to do everything else.
Right.
And if this is where I live to do all of my other stuff, then you don't have to be concerned, am I going to get that information, or do I have to go back to Messenger or Telegram or wherever to get that information? So when we start to look at things like, for example, just starting the show, we habitually will go through and put the StreamYard episode or link information for our own recording into Telegram, just because
Mhm.
we're usually chatting there in Telegram. Well, maybe we change that from now on. Maybe
That's
as a
correct.
rule, we put it in there. And it's not so much to streamline it, it's the fact that we have had to go back at times and access old StreamYard episodes to pull down MP3 files and things like that. So that link has value. So if it has value, it should be referenceable. So,
And you bring an important point into this that was again part of the considerations is now. So we are coming to where this is an episode 65. Okay,
mhm,
there is a lot of hours of show, and the problem is, well, how do you know what else do you have? How do you know what else is happening? Okay, we don't. Okay, and the listeners who discover us on this episode 65, well,
mhm,
how do I know what are the other 64? Do we want to publish and make marketing of those? Now, each one of those cards, okay, as we
mhm,
continue the migration, will have all the information, all the links. So when we said, hey, for example, in this one, okay, we are going to talk about episode 32, I can go to the tab or to the card for
mhm,
32 and have all the information there. So I can add people into this project and say, hey, come here, okay, and I can come here, here is the tab, I need to do this. Or I can even go and create, hey, can you create a new art, a
mhm.
new thumbnail, not art, create an
Yeah.
art is not a great vocabulary, but hey, um, create a new thumbnail where we talk about this. Okay. And I can create it in that episode 32. Say, hey, we mentioned this episode on episode 65, and you can create that. And now I can use it for marketing. But all the communication
Yeah.
stay there. All the communication doesn't move.
Yeah, there's definitely value to that. And again, we could do very similar functionality in tools like Notion and other tools like this, but this happens to be that ubiquitous tool, that friction-free tool between the two of us, that we have a common terminology, we have a common understanding of functionality. We have done what we always tell everyone to do, which is take time to learn your tools, and we know how to make this work as part of our system. So this makes sense as a collaborative tool for the two of us.
Mhm.
That is what I'm recommending to everybody who listens to this. If you have to do collaborative task management, first talk to everybody as to how do they manage their tasks? What are they doing now? If you find a majority of people are using a specific tool or a specific method, take a look at it, because that's a lot less friction than you would have normally. If you find that some people are keeping it on paper, some keep it in, notepad, some people keep it in a text file, some have an app, then you've got to plan for getting people to that common point of thought. One thing I didn't want to lose out on, though, with Todoist that I really like, and this is just a task management application feature. If whatever app you're going to use, look and see if it has the ability to bulk create tasks. If you're able to go in and, like, say in a notepad editor, create a list in that notepad and then copy that list and paste it into your task manager and say, create a listing of, or create individual tasks from each of these line items, that's a wonderful thing. I spun up all of our episodes into the project plan through that method. I went to the site, I highlighted all of them, copied the headers, went back, pasted it in, boom, done. I had 48 tasks created right away. There's a few others I have to add, um, but it sure shortcutted the entire process of getting that information and getting that ball rolling. The other thing is templating, and I'm going to finish up with that today. Make sure your application has the ability to do templates, because if you're going to do collaborative task management, doing things the same way over and over again is really important, because you should have that consistency. So, Augusto, when you look for something, it's going to be in this section of the card with this information. Here's
Right.
where the thumbnail is, and I know where to put it, and vice versa. Those, instead of having to stand that up each time where things get forgotten, templates and being able to duplicate static ones that act as a template can really make or break your solution. So we'll
Yep.
see how this works out. I have
Well,
high hopes for this. I think it's going to make our process of production easier. I mean, we don't have a complicated show methodology by any stretch of the imagination. We're kind of footloose and fancy free with a lot of this stuff. But just being able to go through and take a tool that we both utilize and elevate the process of production for the show is going to be not only a good experience, but I think beneficial to the show as a whole.
but I think one of the powers we're going to bring in here is the speed on the collaboration and the
Yes.
ease of that. And I think that's where it's going to be very, very powerful.
I agree completely. And I think we're going to start, and we will revisit this topic over the next several weeks as we use this more and more, because labeling is going to become a key. How we manipulate the labels,
Hmm.
ways how do we transition shows from an idea to pre-recording to recorded to published, to follow up. How does that flow work into the back and forth? And we will revisit that,
Yep.
because I think that's really going to determine what the long-term viability of this is for us.
Yep.
So yeah, it's
And
a thing.
it's a thing now. So, but with this, follow us where you like to listen to podcast, like us or subscribe to us and leave us a review. You can also interact with us in personalproductivity.club. We have a section in there where you can go ask questions, interact with us. So we are Augusto Pinaud and Art Gelwicks. See you next time from your favorite device.